Right? In order to understand God, we need to use physical, whilst also bearing in mind that he isn't physical.
In the case of God's actions having negative consequences, you're either saying God did not foresee it, or you're saying that he didn't know what he was doing.
Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, by the way, he discussed this with those philosophers who said they put that to compare to God. They said whatever is a human thing, which is a perfect thing for a human being, then it may apply to God.
If an outcome happens that you're not happy with, what that means is that you wish you did it a different way, and that's where the regret comes in. And what we're saying is that the majesty of Allah is that he does everything with perfection. Okay.
Right? You've thrown me now. I don't
It's not merciful. I will remind you. It's not merciful.
Moshe Goss, that he's not merciful. Right? Then that would be a deficiency in Moshe Goss.
Right.
Therefore, I can't say about God that he's not merciful. This is the way that Maimonides looks at it. Right?
So you use a human to understand God, basically?
Yes, because that's all you can do.
Don't you think the other way around should be?
What?
Shouldn't God be independent of the human?
Wait, hold on. The other way around is to understand God based on. The other way around is to understand humans based on God.
No,
God tells us to understand.
For example, yes.
How we should understand human is also from God, isn't it? Like, for example, he tells us good and evil, how to identify good and evil. Otherwise, everyone will have their own subjective understanding of humans, Like, they'll say, oh, Stalin is a good person for some people because he treats them nicely. And the people he treats them evil, they say, oh, he's an evil person. Subjectively, they're both correct.
Do you really want to go there?
You see, that's my point.
Do you really want to go there
If he wants to, yeah.
Okay. So,
really?
Oh, it's one of those.
yeah, one of those. You discover now.
That's what I'm saying. Look, God tells us.
Do you really want to go there?
I'll be honest, I didn't know where he was going. I'll be honest. Because he was talking about Canaanite war gods. I didn't know what he was talking about.
He's been gone a long while ago.
Well, you should, because that's where your God comes from.
He's been gone a long
okay,
while.
fine. So
That's where your God
not
comes
quite.
from.
Okay.
So he's not one of the. Okay, he's one of the atheist kind of guys.
Atheist, confused.
Let's carry on.
Do you want to go into morality with your God, really?
Okay.
Really?
God, come on.
Do you want to go there?
Let's stick to what we're talking about.
Listen, you shouldn't be a heckler,
Yeah, come on. Let's stick to what we're talking about. Let's not be.
Okay, I'll let you finish it, but Josh, I've got so many questions for you,
So
Josh.
mercy,
I've got a lot of questions for you,
if a person
Josh.
does not have mercy, Moshe Goss doesn't have mercy. He's deficient. If Moshe Goss is not kind to people, then he's deficient. Now, there's a few other things that would also be deficient in Moshe Goss.
All right.
There's a few other things about Moshe Goss that would make him deficient. For example, if Moshe Goss didn't have a face,
Are we going somewhere with this to answer the repentance question?
I'm going somewhere with this.
Okay, but to answer the repentance
Yes, to answer that's exactly why I brought up this.
Josh, you really sound like a lawyer now.
This
You're
is
like
ridiculous.
proper. You're getting proper. Like you were very soft before. Now I see like a bit of fire in there. Yeah. He's
warmed up a bit.
He developed.
He has. Yes.
You've got a big book there, Josh. I've got so many
Josh
questions.
has now become a man. Go on, Josh.
Moshe Goss did not have a face, he would be deficient, which is why we can't talk about God as not having a face, even though we know he's not physical, right? He's not physical, but we can't say of him he doesn't have a face, right? We can't say about Moshe Goss that he doesn't have 2 feet, because then he'd be deficient, be a cripple, right?
I'm getting impatient now.
Right?
I'm going somewhere with this.
Therefore, if Moshe Goss does something which doesn't have good consequences,
Yes.
right?
So who's Moshe Goss?
You didn't want me to call about Fred Brock, talk about Moshe Goss. I can talk about Muhammad bin Salam if you want. I don't really care.
No, but so are you saying God has feet and face?
No, I'm saying that we can't say that he doesn't.
But you can't say as well, and as well you cannot say he does. You just be in the middle. You don't know.
The way to understand God is in order to think about
until it tells you
in order to think about
That's
what
proper
we know,
agnostic thinking.
right? In order to understand God, we need to use physical, whilst also bearing in mind that He isn't physical.
Yeah, so Josh, to some extent,
And therefore, the answer is,
Yeah, go on.
if Moshe Gross did something that had negative consequences, and then he did not regret it, we would say that's a bad thing. That's a deficiency in Moshe Gross.
Sorry, if he did something negative and then he regrets it.
He did something with negative consequences.
Okay.
And then he did not regret it. That's a deficiency, because he has not regretted the negative outcomes of something.
So did he do it deliberately? When you say he did something negative consequence,
in
did
each
he do
one
it
of these
deliberately?
things, he did it deliberately, right? He did it, right? And there were negative consequences, or maybe he did not.
But that would be sin, right? That would be sin. What are you defining as sin?
Fine.
What do you mean fine?
The point I'm making
Next you're going to
is,
say God is sinning.
no, I'm not.
Listen.
That's a
let him finish. And
Josh,
The idea to have a higher clarity about consequences of actions is something which is inherently not a deficiency.
Does
And
God have
that's
consequences for his negative
and
actions?
that's why we say about God,
comparing man to God now.
after there are consequences to something God did, even though God knew of those
Let him finish.
consequences, even though God knew those consequences.
Josh, the
and
whole
the
idea of
action of
Josh,
God,
Josh.
and the action, I'm going to finish my sentence.
Yeah,
and
finish.
the action of God was not negative. Right, the consequences of those actions, which God foresaw would be in some sense negative, it has to be, from our understanding, that God has to have regretted it. Because if not, then God does not have this higher clarity of consequences of actions.
okay,
Hashim, say.
You finished, Josh? You finished? Hashim.
The thing is, when we make mistakes, yeah, we have regret.
It's his view.
Because
you are
talking my ear.
Please. The reason we regret is because we did not foresee it as a mistake.
True.
In the case of God's actions having negative consequences, you're either saying God did not foresee it, or you're saying that he didn't know what he was doing. In a way.
There is a third.
Okay.
Possibility.
What is the third
The
possibility?
third possibility is that when we take the human attribute and apply it to God, we're not taking it 100%. We're taking that particular stage of it. I don't need to take the previous stage, right? The part of the regretting that we want to take over and talk about God is the part about the higher clarity at the end. What we're not taking over is the cause of the mistake that caused the higher clarity. That's not what we're talking about.
Listen. I will say something.
Shake.
Listen to him. This is the analogy with Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, by the way. He discussed this with those philosophers who said they put that to compare to God. They said whatever is a human thing, which is a perfect thing for a human being, then it may apply to God. So that's one of the things. And as well, they try to make that the main concept of good and bad and how to deal with the things is the human nature rather than God himself. Now, what's the consequence of this? A Christian could use the same principle and apply it in the same manner to say, okay, you said regretting is a virtue from someone. If he commit a mistake, it's a virtue from someone. So that's why when God do such thing, that is a virtue for him to regret. That's what I understand from you. Now, the consequence of this, that means if someone doesn't have children, as a human nature, this is a deficient thing. So the one who is not deficient, the one who produced children. So that's why due to this, from the goodness of the people that to have children. So the same Christian to say, okay, what's the problem for God to have a son? It's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same concept. They could use the same thing because it's a perfect attribute for a human being. They could apply it to God to have a son. Otherwise, will be deficient. If the human being doesn't have a son or a child, is a deficient. So the same thing for God. If he doesn't have a son, that's deficient. That's why he should have a son to show his mercy to the creation. You see what's going on? That's exactly if you apply the same principle.
Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 1.
You see the point? You understand my point?
In answer to your question, Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 1. You are the children of the Lord your God. So you want me to say, well, then the only logical consequence is that you'll end up with a Christian view. Not so, because we believe that we are God's children, but not in a literal sense.
In what sense? In what sense?
In a spiritual sense.
Okay, so
what do you mean? Like metaphoric?
Yes.
Metaphorical, yeah.
In a spiritual sense.
So in what?
And therefore, just as a person has produced children,
meaning
God has
creation.
created children.
So why did he kill his children then?
That's another problem.
Because that's exactly the point. You know, the reason he regretted is because when his children became wicked, God said, let's eliminate them all with a flood.
Let's kill them.
So it goes against you still, my friend.
No, it does not.
It does, because God eliminating his children.
If Moshe
in fact, the wicked and the good, both were eliminated.
Or command. Listen.
Now he has to go.
Listen.
541.
Or he commands his army to kill other children that he has created, to say kill every single man and woman and a child, even an old. So that's another thing.
Just what it is. I think what it is.
And donkeys.
Just
What about donkeys?
what it is that
what donkeys they have done to God?
The concept of regretting something is admitting that I got it wrong. I wish I'd done it differently. Do you see my point?
I disagree.
Well, look, if an outcome happens that you're not happy with, what that means is that you wish you did it a different way. And that's where the regret comes in. And what we're saying is that the majesty of Allah is that He does everything with perfection. His knowledge is perfect, His actions are perfect, and there is no concept of regret, because there's no regret of an action that God did or didn't do.
Because He knows the consequence.
Because He knows perfectly what to do, when to do, and how to do.
And the consequences.
So when those consequences,
that's the thing.
When those consequences that God creates are in fact negative consequences.
Yes.
And you're saying that God does not regret it.
No.
In that we cannot look at God as saying regret.
We can't say regret. What we can say is that Allah is pleased or displeased with a person's action, but that's directly in relation to what you do, how you behave, what you might do. So you believe the same concept, that God is not pleased with a person who worships a calf. He's angered by that.
Yes.
God is pleased with the one who doesn't attribute partners to Him and just worships Him alone.
Yes.
But God does not regret that He worshipped the calf, because regret is a term that we would attribute to getting an action or an outcome opposite to what I'd intended.
Mistake.
I could turn the same argument and flip it on its head against you.
Okay.
Because I could say, well, God is pleased by this. That tells me, what does pleased imply? Yes. Pleased, if you're pleased by something, that implies you've got some sort of benefit from something. God gets benefits. Yeah. God gets benefit from something that a human has done.
No.
That's the implication.
No. Look.
I could put the same thing.
The important thing, Josh, is this: that even in the Old Testament, God is angered by the actions of some people.
Yes,
but He knows
that fits into my framework.
But He knows that they're going to do that because He has all knowledge.
Yes.
So we're not that different in that sense.
Fine, but the thing is, the thing that I'm saying is, within the framework that I've just outlined, the anger is absolutely fine, right? Because anger against evil is a good thing.
Yes.
If Moshe Goss was not angry at evil, then that would be a deficiency on him as well.
But
it fits perfectly within the paradigm I've explained.
But what might be deficient in me, or what might be good in me, doesn't necessarily mean God has to have that attribute.
That's true, but it's not about what God actually has. It's about how we understand.
Because if as a man, I did not desire a woman, some would argue that I was deficient.
Yes.
Right? But I would not attribute, na'uzubillah, that God is somehow needing of some form of attraction of some sort.
Or a son, or things
like that. But for me,
that.
that's a deficiency. But I can't attribute that to God, to Allah.
Who says that desire is not a deficiency? Maybe desire is in fact a deficiency.
But you're claiming that Allah created desire in our hearts to marry, to procreate, to have children, and now you're saying that that's a deficiency.
the desire, right? There's parts of the desire which are in fact a deficiency, like lust, for example.
Well, of course.
We're not talking about this.
We're not talking about lust. We're just talking about normal
the normal desire to reproduce,
for love, for companionship,
for children.
For children.
Well, we believe that we believe that God loves His children. Yeah. Again, love mening.
I'm talking about the word desire.
You're talking about desire.
So when a man,
desire sounds to me like love.
A heterosexual man who finds his wife attractive.
Have intimate relations with
to have intimate relations with, or to be with, to talk with, to whatever. I would say that would be a natural inclination of what it is to be a man, right?
Okay.
I would not attribute that to Allah, to God,
because it's not something because it is in a way an efficiency.
Well, you're saying that God has created this attribute of being attracted as something that, yes, I agree, it can become. It can, if it's inappropriate, i.e., if it's for anyone other than your wife. If you lust after or desire somebody who's not you're married to, under Judaism, that would be a sin, right?
In fact, you know what? It's very interesting you brought up a wife. If you look in Hosea, the whole parable that Hosea says is that Israel, who elsewhere is described as being the children, is now described as the wife, right? Who has actually gone astray and has committed adultery, going after the idols.
No, but Josh, that's a different point.
So that
Josh.
Metaphor also exists.
No, but Josh, that's a different
That metaphor
point.
also exists.
No, Josh, what you said is that we can't attribute to God a quality that we don't feel that we have that is a good quality. Right. So in other words, God is that as well. But what I'm trying to explain to you is that if a man desires his wife, finds her attractive, he finds her appealing, he has that desire, that inclination to be with her, we think that's a normal, natural thing that Allah has given all of us. But we wouldn't attribute that to God, though. That's what I'm trying to say.
So from that perspective, I can say that...
brothers, ignore.
From that perspective, so we could also fit that in and say, actually, we can attribute it to God in the way that He chose a people that He connected with. Right?
But you're
in
saying
that kind of way.
But listen,
you can also say that.
But the function,
and again, it's not in a physical sense.
You see, Joshua, you see, this is the problem here, because you said earlier something which is a perfect attribute to the human being could apply to God. So that's what he's bringing you the same concept. He said you cannot be using this in the same way.
I know exactly what he's saying.
You see, that's the problem. Not just that, and add to it.
Go away. My God, honestly.
I would love to see him arguing a Big T. That would be hilarious.
Arguing with?
Big T.
Who's that?
The Shia fellow.
Oh my God, that would be nuts.
I'd love to have those two. I think that would be amazing.
So you see here, going back to the point. So regret, it could be a virtue for us as a human being to regret, because we are sinner, we are deficient,
because we don't know.
We make mistakes because we don't know the consequence of our action. For example, if someone design a plane and then later on we regret, I wish I modified it in this way. You will not go into this plane knowing this person could regret. But you know, if a person firm with the knowledge what he has done, so that's what should be confident to what he is creating, for example, or what he's making for others. So when you say God regret, as if God doesn't know the consequence of this, or thinking that it could be better than that, or to be improved, that means as if it was imperfect in the first place, to be improved.
I already answered this question, and I'll answer it again in the same way that I answered it before. The answer is that we are taking one part of the concept of regretting, which is the main part, which is the higher clarity over the consequences of an action. We're not taking the narrative of the action itself. That's not what we're taking and applying to God. We are applying very specifically, the clarity of the consequences, not the narrative of the action.
Okay, I think, Josh, we've actually debated this as much as we probably can.
Yeah.
I think the Islamic point of view would be that Allah is perfect. His attributes are perfect. The action of regretting is imperfection, and we would never attribute that to Allah. Now, I know that
that's why we disagree.
I know that you have
we are at an impasse.
I understand that you have a different view on that,
right?
And you're entitled to your view. But I'm just saying that Islamically we would not attribute that to.
Jewishly we would. And that's fine.
We can agree to disagree. Of course.
At the same time, until now, because for us, until now, you didn't define God, the God concept in the Jewish, for example, faith. Until now, there is no kind of a specific definition to say this is God. So as if you are, that's why many of the agnostic people, they will agree with you because there is no definition of God to you. I mean, as a Jew, you're going to define God. So God is something, opposite to nothing, So something, anything, it has attributes. Anything in existence has attributes.
Qualities,
qualities,
exactly.
Yeah. So if you are talking about has no qualities or no specific qualities, have no specific attributes, you're talking about nothing. So if it's something, it should have qualities and attributes. What are they?
To me, definition, right, which is the first point you made, definition equals limitation. When I define something, I am putting it into a box.
No. Josh,
I'm saying this is what it is.
Josh, if I say all-knowing, how is that limiting?
It's not a definition, but that's a description.
But if I say a quality of all-knowing,
that's a description.
It's a quality that's possessed all-knowing.
It's still a description. It's not
a description of a quality.
Fine, but it's not a definition.
But Josh, the point that we're trying to make here, an attribute, a quality, something inherently possessed by the entity, God Almighty, if that quality is, one of the qualities is all-knowing, that means that there is no knowledge outside of God. That's not limitation. That's actually completely
comprehensive.
It's true that is not that's not limitation, and the reason why is because it's not a definition.
Anyway,
it's not a definition.
Josh, are you ready to do the Shahada?
No, absolutely not.
All right, it was nice. Come on the stream next time we're on.
Yeah, anyway.
We'll have another chat.
That's good. We had a good discussion at least. Let's go pray.
I don't know where he went. I think maybe he went.
Let's go to pray. Let's go pray.
Nice.
Let's go pray.
Yeah.
Let's go pray.
Who's this?
Very good thing as a human.
I think.
I'll place them on the cameras.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye. Take care.
Josh, see you later.
See you.
You all right? Oh, yes.